News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. The U.S. has sunk an Iranian warship, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth.
An American submarine sunk an Iranian warship that thought it was safe in international waters. Instead, it was sunk by a torpedo. The first sinking of an enemy ship by a torpedo since World War II.
The Iranian ship sank off the coast of Sri Lanka with 32 sailors rescued and more than 100 missing or dead. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kaine, says the operation is now moving deeper inland into Iran.
We will now begin to expand inland, striking progressively deeper into Iranian territory and creating additional freedom of maneuver for U.S. forces.
Kaine spelled out the U.S. strategy, which hinged on clearing out Iranian air defenses and now shifts to targets inland with airstrikes from fighter jets. Iran is pushing back at a New York Times report that its intelligence ministry reached out indirectly to the CIA about discussing terms to end the war. Bloomberg's Patrick Sykes.
That would be really de-escalatory if it's true. Though it is a slightly surprising place for an offer like that to come from.
A ministry source tells Iran's Tasnim news agency the report is falsehood and psychological warfare. President Trump could raise global tariff rates to 15% sometime this week. Treasury Secretary Scott Bezzant tells CNBC the duties will kick in for 150 days under Section 122 of the Trade Act.
During the 150 days, we will see studies from U.S. TR on Section 301 tariffs, from Commerce on Section 232, and it's my strong belief that the tariff rates will be back to their old rate within 5 months.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bezzant on CNBC. President Trump raised global tariffs to 10% last month, the day after the Supreme Court struck down his sweeping emergency tariffs. The European Union expects to be exempt from that hike. Sources tell Bloomberg the EU has received assurances that the U.S. will keep a 10% tariff rate in effect for EU's exports. Some relief on Wall Street. Stocks rose, oil steady. Developments in the Middle East boosting traders' optimism that the war in Iran could be shorter than feared. We check the markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 up 0.75%. NASDAQ up 1.3%. The Dow up about 0.5%. The 10-year Treasury yield at 4.06%. The 2-year yield at 3.51%. Bitcoin now 7.5% higher. It is close to $73,000. And oil is less than 1% lower. The ISM Services PMI shows the service economy expanded in February at the fastest pace since mid-2022, powered by robust orders growth and business activity. And ADP reports private sector unemployment rose by 63,000 jobs in February. Fed Governor Steven Myron says it is still appropriate to continue cutting interest rates despite the war in Iran. He says it's too early to take a stance on the impact of war in the Middle East on the U.S. economy.
At the moment, I think it's too early to sort of have any firm views as a result of that. Oil's gone up a bit, but the major question is, does oil stay up or does it come back down? And that, of course, will depend on how things play out.
Fed Governor Steven Myron on Bloomberg TV. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison testified before a House Oversight Committee hearing on a social services fraud scandal in Minnesota. In his opening statement, committee ranking member Robert Garcia accused the Trump administration of using fraud as an excuse to allow members of Immigration and Customs Enforcement to act violently in Minnesota.
This is really about not just what's happening in Minnesota through that operation, but the ways that President Trump has waged his own personal war on Minnesota.
The committee is investigating what officials say were fraud schemes that stole an estimated $9 billion from state social services, some of which helped children. Walz dropped his re-election bid over the scandal. The Trump administration froze billions of dollars in federal funds to Minnesota. In Texas, State Representative James Tallarico will face the winner of a Republican runoff between the incumbent John Cornyn and Attorney General Ken Paxton. Representative Jasmine Crockett conceded the race early this morning to Tallarico, the state representative who has emerged as a rising star in the Democratic Party. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.